Hello, I'm so excited to be back with you guys this week. I have another amazing guest I get to share with you, and her name is Michelle Vezilj. Thank you for being here. I want you to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell everybody what you're up to in this world.
Hi, thank you for having me. I
Yeah.
am a spirit baby communicator, a medium, and I am a hypnotherapist and sound healer. And I use all of those modalities within my company, within my business for my clients, helping mothers with preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. And I'm so curious because I have some spirit little baby stories I could tell you. We'll have to exchange some stories, but I'm curious what grabbed you to get into that because it is a very specific niche. And I'm assuming if you can talk to spirit babies, you must be a channel of some sort.
Yes, I am absolutely a channel. So I originally started with psychic mediumship. So speaking to people's higher selves, their guides, their angels, their past loved ones, animals on the other side. And as I was going through that exploration, spirit babies began to become more of a presence. When I was 30, I was at my first breathwork ceremony, and we were doing a kind of breath work where the hands, they curl inward. You're oxygenating the body. And so I had never experienced something of that level and that frequency at that point. And so I was taken up above the clouds. I just felt clouds whirling past me. And there was this short little gnome like man, and he
Oh,
did
wow.
this with his arms. He just presented a baby to me, and I heard my voice go, "Is that my son James?" First of all, I didn't know that I was going to have children, and I did not know that his name would be James. James has a very important meaning. It's funny because my friend that had passed away that opened me up to mediumship, his middle name was James. And then my partner, Tyler James, I found out on our first
Oh,
date. Yeah, his middle name is James. And so, pretty crazy synchronicities. But since that
yes.
child came into my awareness and into kind of my guides, he started to bring about more clients who wanted communication with their children.
So you were in breath work. You have this magical, first of all, I love breath work because it's the thing that can really crack people open without having to do necessarily like a medicine journey. It still has like a beautiful deep effect. And so this is this little baby being coming through. And do you feel like this is your son to be most likely?
Yes, although I do think since then I have been in communication with a
Mhm.
little girl. And so I do think that there is a little girl coming first. She feels very different than this boy. I think children can be attached to one parent or the other. I think my son has been more so in my sphere, and this little girl is in my partner's. When I met Tyler, she became a bigger presence to me. And now that I don't even feel my son's energy anymore, he's kind of taken a back seat. It's like he opened the door, and then now she's very present because I think she'll, within the next year, we're planning to conceive. And so she feels very front and
Right.
center for me.
That is so neat. I love that. And so I too, at some points over the years in my business, have connected to baby beings. And I think it's so special. And I have noticed that certain baby beings are stronger than the other one. It's almost they're like, me, I'm going first, I'm coming in. And I just crack up because even just channeling that energy, you can almost tell which one is, it's not that they're stronger than the other, but they're making themselves known. And it's like, I'm going to be the firstborn. And I just
Yes.
find it so fascinating, right?
Yeah. It's like they take the
Yeah.
mic and they open the door for the others.
And so I could imagine when you're working with women, because I would think that maybe they're scared, or if they've been waiting to have babies, or they're just kind of embarking on the journey, I would imagine that this information that you're providing them is so helpful and so wildly valuable.
I get a wide array of clients, of women who've reached out. Sometimes it's women who are questioning if they want to be a mother. Sometimes it's women who are wanting a connection with their spirit baby, whether they have felt that child or not. Sometimes it's women who have experienced difficulty getting pregnant or who've experienced miscarriages. And then I'll work with women as they're going through pregnancy and into postpartum as well. And even speaking to the children that are already earthside in the physical, helping with any nonverbal children, any child. I've always said I'm here to give a voice to children. And that includes those that are here present with us as well.
I think that's beautiful. So when you're kind of tapping into these baby beings, is it connecting the mom with the baby beings? Like, how does that work? Like, if our listeners have never heard of baby beings and they're like, what are these girls talking about? How would you describe a baby being? And how do you help connect the mom to the baby being?
Well, I find that information is power. It's key. And so when we learn of their presence, that is often enough to open the connection if it's not already felt. A lot of mothers, when they're pregnant, a channel opens. So there is that connection. And even when they're in the place of conception, that manifestation has opened that channel so that they're able to communicate. But if they haven't, there's nothing wrong. There are lots of women who haven't yet connected to their children. What I do is I bring in their energy and I let the mother know what they feel like and what their personality is like, what their purpose, what their life lessons, their karma. And so as they're getting this whole scope, oftentimes they'll be closing their eyes alongside me. I'm clairvoyant, so I'm mostly seeing. I'm feeling, bringing in this energy. But
Yeah.
when they have their eyes closed, it's almost as if they're getting an energetic attunement, like a compass that's pointing them toward that child.
That makes a lot of sense. And so when they can start to kind of align their energy with that baby being, then it makes it more real probably for them. And I would assume, very helpful for them to start to connect and have their own relationship with the baby being.
The whole point is to connect the mother to the child, because before now, there has been a connection. Obviously, their energy is within ours. So we have our energy, their energy, and then the third energy that's being created. But it's now we're stepping into more of a spiritual time where we're aligning with that presence and really getting to know them. That's why the connection between mother and child is so expressive, so important, is because they're literally a piece of us. And so exploring that even before they come into the physical body can be so powerful in building that connection.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I was pregnant with my first daughter, that whole entire pregnancy was a complete shit show. I mean, from the beginning to the end, it was problem after problem. And yeah, it was scary. It was a scary pregnancy because I had some placenta issues. And anyways, I remember asking my daughter, because every time I would go to the doctor, I was going to these specialized perinatologists and all this stuff. And they were always warning me, like, oh, you may have to have her at 20 weeks. You may have to have her at 22. It was always this kind of fear being put into my mind and into my energy field. And so it was really challenging. And so I remember going home one day and I put my hands on my belly and I was just like, okay, I need to connect to her and I need to ask her, do you feel safe? And are you okay right now in my belly? Like, what do I need to know? Because I'm going to trust you over which sounds crazy. It wasn't that I was going to override what the doctors were saying, but I knew she had an intelligence to her that was connected to something higher and bigger.
Yeah.
So I asked her, and she said, "I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. I'm small, but I'm going to be okay." And I said to her, I go, "Well, when do you think you're going to come?" Because they kept scaring me about when she's going to arrive early and be in the NICU and all these things. And she said, "I'm going to come at 30." The number I saw in my head was 37.5, 37 and a half weeks. And sure enough, Michelle, she came at 37 and a half weeks. She was the tiniest baby, but she didn't have to go to the NICU. She was the strongest baby in the nursery area where all the newborns were. And I had to laugh because it sounded so insane that I would ask her, "When are you coming?" But I felt like I knew her. Like from the moment I got pregnant with her, I remembered her from another lifetime. And I was just like, "I'm going to trust this." And it just unfolded. So I completely understand the work that you're doing and how valuable it is, because there are things that can happen when you connect with your child that can make the process maybe not seamless, but easier, I feel, and more joyful.
Thank you for sharing that story. I'm so glad that she is safe and healthy. My work oftentimes for women will come to me during pregnancy if they have gotten news from the doctor and they want to check in on the child. And it's so wonderful that we're able to telepathically communicate with these children. It's like animals. Animals will speak through images. They're telepathic. And so that's how I view the communication, because there's a purity of animals, just like there is a purity of children. Their communication is visual and telepathic for us. And they want so much to be in communication with us. They want that channel to be open. And it's amazing that you have the ability to do so.
So I'm curious, when you read these baby beings, are you able, because a question that I think people might be thinking about is, if it's a baby, it's like, how can a baby give you information, right? Like, like my daughter saying to me, "I'm coming at 37 and a half weeks." It's like, well, she's a baby. Like, how's she going to know numbers or all these things? I know that's a silly thing to think about, but I wonder how, I know from my perspective, but I'm curious, like, how does that work for you when you're tapping in and speaking telepathically? I almost would imagine you're able to access the total of, like, their total consciousness. I don't know if you have a way that you would describe it.
So just like there's so many dimensional planes, and when I am tapping into a child, I can tap into them at any age, because everything is existing in this here now moment. There is actually no such thing as time. It's a human construct. So in this moment, everything has already happened. All of the versions of you, past, present, future, parallel, all of the in-between spaces and places have occurred. And so your child exists as a higher dimensional being. We're speaking to a higher frequency, that higher self presence, that wisdom. And then every age in between. I remember when I was speaking to my son, there's so many stories I could tell with him, but he most of the time would come to me as a wiser soul. And then every once in a while, I would have a very toddler-like explanation. And I had to ask, "What age are you? Like, where are you at right now?" I've had him also come to me as a 30-year-old. And it's just a beautiful experience and very dreamy when you're working in time. I mean, you can feel this when you're working with your inner child. They say when you work with your inner child, you're reparenting yourself. You go back to those moments, those pivotal moments, and you give that child the love, the reassurance, the support that they needed as a child. And then that actually gets built into their timeline as they're experiencing it. And if you go back and you think about that moment, it's almost shifted a little because of the internal work that you've done. And so that timeline work that you're doing with yourself can also be done with your children.
I want to ask about that in just a second, because I have this question that's nagging at me that I think a lot of women would be curious about, especially if they're in that time frame where they're trying to get pregnant. What do you find is one of the things, like if somebody's been struggling with their fertility, do you find that maybe some energy work or some trauma work would be supportive? And what do you think you've noticed keeps women maybe the most, I don't want to say stuck from getting pregnant, like, but maybe keeping them from getting pregnant?
Yeah. So sometimes it is physical, and sometimes I'll get a message of, oh, you need to gain weight. Oh, there's too many plastics or heavy metals in your body. There's such a distinction between being sterile and being infertile. And there are so many ways to shift being infertile to being fertile. And in our world, we're at a very tough time physically because we're experiencing what can we eat out there, and all of our water, our food systems, our air. And oftentimes I'll see that there's just some detoxing that can be done to the body to help the body be able to hold the child. So that's the physical element of it. Mm-hmm. There's also sometimes children are like, you need to leave that job. You need to move. I don't want to be in that house. That's not the right partner. So there can also be those things as well, because if you are in a job that's very high stress, if you were to get pregnant, that anxiety, that stress goes into the child, and that child may not karmically be meant for that stress. So there may be a shift that the mother needs to make in order to actually physically carry them because of the child's karma.
Okay.
Yes. And then there's also the spiritual elements of it. So there could be, I was working with someone and she was in the process of conception, and she'd been trying and she was frustrated. And I said, there's something at Thanksgiving that's going to happen with your mother that's going to clear some stuff that's been stuck in you that the child did not want, and then you will get pregnant. And so she went home for Thanksgiving. She had an experience with her mother. They had a heart-to-heart. They talked. Things happened and shifted, and she was pregnant the next month.
Oh my God, that is such a cool story. I love that. And I could see, yeah, of course there's going to be, that's amazing that you could see the physical, maybe the stories and the things that are taking up space in their lives, like their job, like you said. I find that to be so fascinating, because I think a lot of times when women go into trying to conceive and get pregnant and all the things, there's more of a focus on the physical.
Yeah.
Just like, I got to get my body put together in the right way and detox or whatever it may be. But to your point, there might be something in the family system, or there might be something that's in their day-to-day life that if the baby comes in, it's not going to be the best situation. I love those examples because it makes it so real. And it reminds me always that healing is so multidimensional, right? It's not just our body. It's, yeah, we want to be the vessels to carry the baby, but we also need to look at all the other ways things are taking up space in our lives.
Absolutely. I know for myself, something that I was experiencing, I feel this little boy coming for me, and I don't know if this is past life or it's just because I'm a woman in this lifetime, but I had a really big rage towards men and the patriarchy. Oh, wow. This little boy is so healing and so kind, and my fiance is the sweetest man in the world. And so after experiencing their two frequencies, I actually went to a somatic healer, and I was like, I need to work through this anger because I don't feel I can carry my son. He's not meant to have this rage, and I do not want to give this to my daughter. I don't want her to have any preconceived notions. She's going to see a loving relationship between her parents. I don't want her to karmically carry that anger. And so I worked through it. I worked through that rage. And now I feel like I'm in a place to carry her. We'll see when we actually start trying where that continues to sit. But I intuitively felt that needed to be handled before we even started trying.
That's very powerful. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people know that those types of things can be passed down. And so for you, just like sharing that awareness is really helpful because I think that unless there's no judgment, but sometimes if we're not exposed to these things, we just don't realize. And so that's beautiful that you were able to work on that before you have your son. I have such a funny random question for you. In a journey years ago, similar to breathwork, but not quite breathwork. And I remember having this little boy run up to me in a vision, and he was already walking and he could talk. And so I was like, okay. And he came up to me and he said, I'm going to be your son. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And I put it to the side in my awareness because at that time I wasn't ready to have kids or anything like that. So when I was having my second daughter, I thought for sure when they called me to tell me the sex that it was going to be this little boy because I was like, this is my little boy. And they were like, no, you're having a girl. And I was like, wait a second, where's this little boy? And so as life would have it, in my journey, I wound up leaving the father of my daughters, and I'm married now to my husband, and he has a son. And it was so crazy. Yeah, because this little boy had blue eyes, which I can't have a blue-eyed baby. Brown eyes. And so he has the big blue eyes and he had that same energy. And I just thought it was so fascinating, Michelle, that I assumed it was going to come through me having the baby. So have you ever heard of that before? Has that ever come across your radar?
Yes, absolutely. I have so many stories that I could share. But yes, a perfect example of this would be when someone is going to adopt. That child belongs to the woman who carried them in as well as the adopted mother. That would be, they have two mothers. And so those children, if I were to speak to them in spirit, would show up for both of those women. And so that child from your second marriage showing up for you, he's just as much your son as if you had had him. And that's so beautiful. I've also experienced where they choose to shift gender. So they'll present as male, and then based off of their purpose, their life mission, the timing, they'll choose to become female or vice versa. Gender is becoming, well, spirits can present how they feel most comfortable, what they resonate with the most. Like my papa, when I speak to him, shows up as a 20-year-old, very, very good-looking, handsome man. And it's just so funny because I've only ever known him as an older gentleman. And so children can do the same. They can show up how they would like to.
These stories are so fun because I never thought about that. I always assumed that the spirit babies would just be for the birth mother, but you opened a whole door for me to think about that with step kids and with adopted kids. Of course, yeah, they're blessed souls in the sense that they get more than one person that's going to love them. And the extra, I call myself sometimes like the bonus mom and the stepmom. I feel really blessed that his name's Aiden. Aiden came into my life and found me, and I knew it was destined because I had seen him all those years. I mean, this was like even before I started having my daughter. So it was just a fun full circle. Now I'm curious, you seem so wildly intuitive. How did you always know you had this gift? How did it come online for you?
Yeah, I think I've always been in tune with myself, but I didn't ever see like dead people. That wasn't my story. When I was a kid, I loved Harry Potter, magic. I did magic. I always had a fascination with witches, but it wasn't until I had a friend pass away when I was going through my Saturn return. I was 28 years old. And one of my childhood best friends passed. And at the time, I also went through a move to Los Angeles. There's a very big spiritual community here. And I started developing my intuitive gifts so that I could speak to him. I just wanted to reach him. And I started with tarot cards, and then that moved into mediumship and channeling. And through that discovery came my company. And I was working with people originally focused on grief. So I was helping people process their past loved ones. And then from there, it became more about doing like highest timeline work, aligning them with their purpose. So I was using some more of my psychic abilities to read their auric field to see what was coming in for them so that I could align them with their purpose for being here and being human. And then it's now my partner and I are talking about having children, and I don't know that I want to be taking in other energies that are not children anymore, because when I'm reading for someone, I'm pulling that energy through my body and pushing it out of me. That's how I view it. I always put protection. I have boundaries and protocols, and that's why I don't see spirits in my space. They very much know I do not want to see them. I'll get physical tells. Sometimes there's certain things they'll do to my fingers to press on me, or I'll see pops of color or flashes of light, but that's the most of what I'll actually see. But as I move into motherhood, my goal for connecting children to mothers and then helping mothers, I have this whole specialty in hypnotherapy where I help mothers prepare for children. So that processing of those emotions that the children karmically are not meant to have, or if there's any fear for pregnancy or for the actual delivery, if during postpartum they need support, hypnotherapy gives me the ability to really be right there with the mother, giving her the love and care that she needs moving through such a transformational time.
That is really cool. So I want to ask you about your hypnotherapy, but I just want to say, I love how your work is, it sounds like it's just this beautiful kind of evolving thing where you started with something and then you went to, like you said, grief, then the highest timeline, and now this. And it just is such a reflection probably of your beautiful journey and your growth. Because I agree with you. We like to teach and work on the things that are interesting to us, that are the most resonant in our fields. And then that's when we can be the most powerful for our clients. So I love that. Hypnotherapy. I do hypnotherapy in my own work, and I've participated as a client in it as well. When I was going through trainings, I had to partner up with somebody and do all this stuff. Could you explain, if somebody's never done hypnotherapy, what that kind of looks like? Because I think it's wildly powerful. And so I think if people have never experienced it, it might be helpful for them just to know, what does that consist of?
So hypnotherapy, wow. I've tried so many different ways of healing. We go through our own dark nights of the soul, and my Saturn return, basically from about 27 to 32, was extremely painful. So I did breath work and sound healing, somatic work and therapy in order to find something that ultimately made a difference. And when I started working in the education of hypnotherapy, learning how to do self-hypnosis, learning how to do hypnosis on others, it changed my whole life. It shifted my ability to bring in a loving partner, my finances, my confidence, my career, like everything changed. And what all hypnosis is it's a meditative state. So we lower the brain waves through different forms of relaxation. We spend a lot of time in beta. We get you to alpha, theta, and then theta. Theta is that sweet spot where this doorway from your conscious mind into your subconscious opens, and we can create lasting change. If we were to look at an iceberg, the subconscious mind is what's underneath the water. It's anywhere from 88 to 95% of your everyday actions. These are subconscious, like blinking and breathing. The way that you are interacting with the world is mostly determined by the belief system within the subconscious mind that was created when you were a child. from your caretakers, which is usually your parents. So this is how generational trauma gets passed down, is that we adopt our parents' beliefs as our own. And then our conscious mind forms around the age of 8. And that is our decision making and our logic. But that only rules 12 to 5% of our everyday. And so we need to be able to get the conscious mind and the subconscious on the same level. And we do that through getting you into that state of hypnosis, which is just a suggestible state of being where that doorway from one to the other opens. And then we start with repetition and reinforcement to create new neural pathways, so that with talk therapy, you have to get to the decision. You understand the pattern. You go, okay, this is the pattern. This is what I'm doing every day. You get there where you need to make a different decision, and you make a different decision. And then you need to get there again. You get to that decision. You're like, okay, I'm not going to do this toxic relationship. I'm going in a different direction. You go in a different direction. Well, you have to keep doing that in order to create a neural pathway. But with hypnotherapy, the neural pathway automatically gets created, and you make that decision without even realizing that anything has changed.
So is it because when you're saying the neural pathway is just dropped in a way, is that how it is through the suggestion, or how does that work?
So there's a couple of ways, 2 things here. First of all, with how I do hypnosis, at the end of our session, you get a meditation that's channeled based off of what you talk to me about, the exercise that we do. And then I create this, which then I record and place over my sound bowls, and you listen to over the next week or 2 to create that neural pathway. But there are some times when the neural pathway is automatically created, and this is called mental and emotional release therapy. This is a part of neuro-linguistic programming, which is a specialized field of hypnotherapy. This is what I work with for mothers in order to carry children who karmically do not want certain emotions placed within them. So mental and emotional release therapy.
Like, tell me more.
Yes. So when a client pops on the call, we'll talk about something that they're experiencing. So say they are experiencing a sadness from rejection. Maybe they have experienced a certain amount of rejection in their life. Maybe it stems from abandonment. Maybe it's an insecurity. And we get to the emotion that's underneath it. So anger is usually sitting on top, and underneath that anger can be sadness. It can be grief, disappointment, betrayal, shame, embarrassment. And we find that we do therapeutic imagery, which is we find say we're going to deal with grief. We find the grief in the body. We have it create an image. We get to know that image, and we take it back to we ask, when was this placed within the subconscious? Was it placed here in a past life, in the womb, or in early childhood? And then I take them back on their path, their road, their timeline to the time in which it was planted. Because what happens, especially in the womb or in early childhood, is that these big emotions, as young ones, we do not have the ability to process them. And so what happens is our bodies are these amazing technologies, and our body says, oh, don't worry, I will hold on to it for you until you're older. And so it holds on to it, and it brings it up for us to deal with, but we don't know that it is doing this. So we're just like, oh my God, I'm rejected again? Why does this keep happening to me? So I take them back to the moment it was implanted, and sometimes it is a past life, and we learn from what happened. We learn from it, and learning from it helps us to process it. And so when it gets processed, it no longer needs to show up anymore. And that neural pathway automatically shifts and changes, and that will no longer be karmically implanted into the child, because it won't be a part of your human existence anymore.
That is so cool. Wait a second, because I have now 3 kids, but I was like, what if a mom already has a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old that she's passed some things down into? Is there hope for that type of situation? Or is it just before conception? Yeah, I'm so curious.
So those children wouldn't have come in if they weren't meant to karmically hold whatever the mother experienced. So they have a contract, it's a soul contract with their mother, that their mother, their father will honor their karma and their life's purpose. So they've chosen a mother at that period in time who has certain experiences during the pregnancy that will then implant into them that will help them with their karma and their life purpose. So the women who already have children, or the woman who is pregnant, take the pressure off of you. That child has already signed up for what it's being given. It's meant to happen. And just trusting the experience that, I mean, there are children who are within their mothers when their mothers are going through the loss of someone, who are going through turmoil of some sort, and that is meant to be there with the child. And that child also is carrying very angelic, very helpful energy. Maybe there's a world in which that mother wouldn't have been able to move through that sorrow as effectively as if the child wasn't with them, because that energy of their child is healing them just as they are going to be a healing presence once they're earthside.
I would think that just everything you're sharing right now would bring a lot of peace to our listeners, because I do agree that there's a very karmic, chosen relationship with child and mother and father, and that it's not so much of, oh my God, I gave my kid this and what am I going to do? It's more of, okay, this is what's happening. And now with somebody that does have kids, like for somebody like me, if I was aware that I could see something kind of manifesting in my kids, do you work with people in that space and say, okay, yeah, let's go back and clear this through hypnotherapy?
Yeah, absolutely. We can go back to the moment that it was rooted within you. It would then be for your children. They would be more of a mirror for you to go, oh, that's work I need to do. And then the children would see the shift with, or even just feel the shift that's occurring within the mother. It can clear a piece of it for their children, but most likely their children are meant to clear pieces of that themselves. Karma is what helps us to learn. It brings in experiences. Yep. And so we cannot do all of that work for them.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that I've always had this understanding within myself that if I work on my consciousness and shift that, then there is this auric effect that reaches my kids. And I don't even need to say anything. They start to shift as well, because we're all in this deep energetic conversation, even if we don't realize it. And so I have a lot of moms that will come to me too and say, oh, what if I'm screwing my kid up? And, you know, I have this thing that happened to me, and what if I give it to my kid? And I'm kind of like, well, we're not meant to be these perfect beings and have everything figured out. We can just work, you know, loving ourselves, and what we need to shift will become wildly apparent to us throughout our lives, and just kind of operating from that place versus I'm broken, I need to fix this, oh, my kids are going to be broken because of this. I'm curious at your thoughts on that.
Yeah, even the most perfect parents mess up their kids. And here's why. I'll give an example from my experience. So I have a wonderful father. I love him so very much. He really showed up for me. And I dated a bunch of avoidant, narcissistic men who it began that they were way more abusive. And as I healed, they just became avoidant, which showed my path. But I could not figure out why. Why was this happening? My relationship with my father was fine. And so knowing mental and emotional release therapy, I was like, well, maybe this happened when I was under the age of 4. So I had a conversation with my mother and I just said, you know, what was dad like when I was a baby, when I was 1 year old? And my mom explained, well, your father was building a company. So he would often come back after you'd gone to bed and he would leave in the morning before you got up. And I was like, oh, so in my perspective, Dad was never around. She was like, well, he was there on the weekends. And as time went on, he was able to spend more time with you. But yes, for the first few years of your life, he was pretty absent in that way. And it was 2 weeks later that I met my partner after I found out that, because I immediately went in and did work on I was like, okay, we know where this is coming from. Now we're going to make this change. I went back to that 1-year-old and I just let that version of myself know, your dad loves you so much that he's building a company that will support you throughout your childhood and teenage years because he wants to make sure that you have the life that you're meant to live. And once that unraveled within me, my abandonment wound shifted and I brought in my first healthy relationship.
Oh, I love that. And congratulations, because that's incredible that you were able to, one, shift it so quickly with that realization, but also the work that you were doing on yourself of reparenting and allowing probably whatever emotions needed to be released. I think that's amazing. What did you call it? Emotional freedom technique, or was it something else?
Emotional freedom technique is tapping, which I do love and am certified in. I swear by it. EFT is great. It'll get your lines of chi in order because oftentimes we have energy stuck in these lines of energy within our body. And so when we tap on certain places, it shifts that energy for us. Fantastic. All for EFT. It's called mental and emotional release therapy, MER.
It never ceases to amaze me how many incredible modalities there are to meet people exactly where they're at, because that's the first time I've ever heard of that one specifically. And so I think that is so cool. And so does that release the stored emotion that is kind of trapped in the child or the former version of a person?
Yes. So I usually have them walk a road that is their timeline. And so we lift them up above the road and we lift them up, so far up above the moment where it was rooted. We help this, I repeat back to them the lessons that they learned from this memory so that it can just move into the subconscious and the subconscious can just become a little bit more flexible. And then I have them look down at their timeline and see all of the moments in which this emotion showed up again. So they'll see all these twinkling lights on the bottom on their road below them. And then I have them envision those moments like fireworking off of their timeline until the lights dim. And then we'll go forward on the timeline above the moment where we're speaking. And I say, do you feel that grief, that rejection now? No. And then I have them go 6 months into the future. Do you feel this here now? No. And then I know the work's done. If when they get to our conversation, they're above us and they're like, oh, I can kind of still feel it. I always ask, are you feeling a memory of it or are you feeling that grief? If they're still feeling the grief, it's further back. So we're supposed to clear the memory that we did, but we still have work to do. And usually it's further back on the timeline. If they went to an age like 8 or 9, it'll probably be about 1 to 3. If they were already at 1 to 3, it's either in the womb or it's in a past life.
That is so incredibly creative how you do that. I really enjoyed hearing, especially the parts about the twinkle lights and then the fireworks shifts. I'm curious, Michelle, because you have so many gifts and you have so many things that you're beautifully explaining between the hypnotherapy and how you're working with the baby beings, all these different things. If someone were starting out on their healing journey, what would you suggest for them to get started? What's the most resonant for you and what would you suggest for them?
So I love to work with someone. I first say, well, let's do some mediumship first. So let's get in there. We'll see what's going on. I get a broad understanding of who they are. And then from there, oftentimes their trauma will show up for me. And so I'm able to go, oh, okay, so here's some things that need to be cleared. And then I suggest hypnotherapy. I have packages where hypnotherapy and mediumship are the same price. So I have packages where if they wanted to do like a 4-pack or an 8-pack, the price goes down as they buy more. And I suggest that because as we get into hypnotherapy, usually when you get to one belief, there's a few underneath it that just need a little bit of shifting and changing. Also, the subconscious it fears the unknown, because the unknown, so like the caveman, when the caveman left the cave, there was often a high chance of death. And so the subconscious mind fears change because the unknown is death, and it likes to keep you in what you know, even if what you know is actually consciously uncomfortable. So if you want a healthy relationship, but subconsciously you're used to toxicity, your subconscious is going to keep you within that toxicity, because even though you're consciously uncomfortable, it goes, yeah, but we know that we can survive this. We don't know we'll survive a healthy relationship. So we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. So, yeah, I would say if someone wanted to work with me, to start with the mediumship to get a broad understanding, to meet me too, right? We have to align with our healers and their frequency,
Yes.
and with their way of giving information. And then from there, hypnotherapy. And then I have a program once they move through hypnotherapy.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I feel like I could talk to you forever. You have so many amazing stories. But thank you for being here and sharing everything you did. And I will definitely include all the information in the show notes so people can find you.